guys, thanks for tuning in. So a couple of weeks ago, I had a chance to visit Peak Brain Institute in Los Angeles, California, and get my brain mapping done, which was very interesting. There's a series of tests that you have to get done, including wearing this EEG brain mapping cap on your head. That's the only way I could describe it. It kind of looks like a swimming cap, but it has all these electrodes attached, and they put this gel throughout that helps it measure your brain waves, brain frequencies, which we all have. For those who don't know, there's the alpha, beta, delta, and theta brainwaves that we all experience throughout various stages of our day. So adults actually, for the most part, are spending most of their time in beta brainwave frequencies, which are aligned with neurotransmitters, norepinephrine, and cortisol. So it helps us stay alert and awake and kind of deal with stress on a day-to-day basis. Then there's the alpha brainwave, which is an alert but a more relaxed state during waking hours. That's the state that we want to hopefully spend more time in. It's the state that kind of gets us into that flow state. So you want to be spending more time in alpha brainwaves rather than beta brainwaves. Then there's the theta and delta states. So theta is a little bit more slower, more relaxed, and there's the delta brainwave, which is what we experience during that deep sleep time when our brain is recharging and rejuvenating and we're completely relaxed. And so those are the four brain waves. And what the brain mapping exercise does is map out how much time you're spending with each brain frequency and where they're coming from in various parts of the brain. And so it was very interesting to go through the results with Dr. Andrew Hill on the call today. I learned a lot of things about myself. Some results were surprising. Some results kind of validated what I was experiencing already. And so I wanted to share the results with you guys. For those who are interested to see what a report would look like doing an EEG brain mapping exercise. And if you have any questions or comments, do leave them in the comment section. I will read them. And otherwise, I will see you on the other side. Enjoy.
Your performance is extremely high.
Okay.
And we aren't seeing a lot of bottlenecks. There's a couple of things in the brain maps that might become performance goals, but very high performance. So this document you're looking at on the screen with the bar graphs is the output from your attention test. So if you remember the 1s and 2s that you did, that lovely, everyone loves that test.
Yeah, I was taking that test, jet lagged completely first morning in, but I felt like I was doing pretty well when I was taking it.
You did, yeah. I mean, really, really well, actually. So for all the numbers on this page, the average for any particular age is 100. That's the mean of a bell curve, is 100. And it's about a 12 to 15 point standard deviation of change compared to the average. So your attention quotient is 128. Pretty much 2 standard deviations better than average. And same thing for response control, almost 2 standard deviations better than average. So attention is successfully clicking on the 1s. Response control is successfully not clicking on the 2s.
Gotcha. Wow.
And
I'm so shocked by that. I feel like all of our, with just digital devices and phones, I feel like all of our attention spans are just going down and down as the years go by. So I was a little nervous for that test.
No, it's
not going to be that great.
you're out on the edge of the bell curve. You're 2 standard deviations better than average.
Oh, that's great to hear.
This anything above 115 is like a performance benefit. It's strategically advantageous. But you're like, this is really, really good performance. You rarely see this, especially across all the scores. Sometimes you'll have certain scores that are high, other ones that are low. But yours are really nice and robust. So good job.
Thank you.
Excuse me. You see your auditory versus visual under attention is the same, roughly.
Yeah.
But under impulsivity or response control, you have about a half a standard deviation difference.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So you're better at not being impulsive or reactive visually. You're still excellent auditorily, but not quite as good as you are visually.
Interesting.
Let's break it down. So you see these 3 bars here under the bar graphs. The orange, green, and blue under the right-hand side are labeled prudence, consistency, and stamina. Prudence is being careful. Can you adjust as you go? Can you monitor? If you make a mistake, can you slow down? That kind of stuff. Consistency is just what it sounds like. How well can you sort of lock in to a good pattern without too much effort, you know?
Yeah.
And then stamina. This is a very boring, as you might agree, test. I mean, really tedious. And so this is a 1 second engagement of your attention that you have to keep re-engaging again and again and again and again for 23 minutes, I think it is. So people will tail off, and tailing off is not a problem, but the degree to which you degrade in performance, we call stamina.
Yeah.
And for visual, you're above average, 110. For auditory, you're typical at 98. So that's your worst score is an average score.
Yeah, I mean, I was noticing with myself while I was taking the test in the beginning, you know, you're full of attention. You're like, all right, I got this. I can do this. And then towards the end, you know, you can't help but start like maybe having some thoughts creeping in, and then
exactly
back and you're like, no, I'm listening. And then sometimes it's tricky because you start second guessing yourself. Did I just hear one, or was I thinking something else?
Right.
So I was definitely noticing towards the end of the test, you know, having to put a little bit more effort into.
But all that being said, you're still, you know, almost 2 standard deviations above average. So, you know, you're perceiving your bottlenecks, but the things you're perceiving are typical things. Just everything else is so much above average. That's why you notice bottlenecks.
Yeah, interesting.
All right, so the bar graphs are the trial resources. We also have sustained scores, which are patterns of behavior, if you will, across the whole test. 119s, good job. 1.5 standard deviations above average for, you know, managing resources across time. Wonderful.
So is the sustained auditory attention quotient, is that different from stamina, or how is that different?
It is. Stamina is how you're tailing off.
Yeah.
In auditory, for instance. Sustained is more about the patterns of errors you're making. Are you making, you know, are you able to continue? Sustained is sort of a combination of stamina and consistency.
Gotcha. Okay.
But it has other features. It has time block-based features that are different than the consistency is minute-to-minute comparisons. But sustained is like trend features across those 23 minutes. Those would not show up as inconsistent. If the trend is the same, it would be consistent. So it wouldn't catch it. But if it's a trend that's unusual, it might show up in sustained, but not in consistency, for instance, you know? Yeah. So it's another granular thing looking at the whole block of time, as opposed to comparing minute to minute to minute to minute. It's a different time course of analysis, essentially. It's the only real difference.
Gotcha. Okay. And then sorry, just to the blue bar graph there, the light blue for vigilance.
Vigilance. So the left-hand side, vigilance, focus, and speed. Vigilance is noticing when things are new. From an auditory to a visual, from a 2 to a 1. That's a vigilant or an alerting event.
Okay.
Speed is how fast you are.
Okay.
Focus is the opposite of an alerting event, the opposite of vigilance. Focus is staying on when things are not changing, when it's a repetitive one. So you're better at focus than you are at vigilance. That's unusual.
Oh, is it? Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Most people are pretty alert for the new thing, but then they drift when it's not exciting. And you're able to lock in really well once you engage, but again, this is still above average. It's a half a standard deviation above average. But for you, relatively, it's a little late, a little slow to drag the lens of your attention around to the new thing.
But then once I lock in, it's like I'm there.
Yeah, hugely. You're really focused, and you're actually kind of lean. I think you perceive the vigilance being a little soft. It's not, absolutely, but you know, relatively for you, it might be as the one resource. And that's why your speed is high. You're going to be extra quick to make up for things you may have just missed.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
And you're compensating with your fast speed to the point where you're way above average. So none of this little 107, those aren't getting in the way at all.
So then the score at the top, is that an average of all the scores on the bar graph?
On the 128?
Different. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the 128 is a compound score that combines auditory and visual, essentially. Yeah. It's odd that it's a higher number than either of these. It's because within each of these, you have a specific thing dragging it down, but you don't when you look across the whole test. So it also uses some of the auditory sustained focus too for the attention quotient. So there's other features you aren't quite seeing just in the bar graphs that might feed into the overall number. They're usually pretty accurate. Like this one's pretty typical, 125. You know, usually your score's somewhere in between those two if they're not the same.
Yeah. Okay.
So the fact that this is so high is probably because you're so damn fast, and it's blowing the average scores above. And nothing's below 100. Yeah. So I rarely see everything like this. This is just gorgeous. So. All right, next page. reaction times are fine. Your fine motor hyperactivity is within normal limits. So you clicked twice within a trial when you didn't want to. That's not a big deal. It's typical. And then here, this is actually showing a little bottleneck, persistence errors. So persistence errors making the same mistake twice in a row or 3 times in a row. And yours actually were severe is the scale. So you made the same mistake auditorily several times in a row, more than twice, probably like 3 times in a row. Let's see if we can find it. Go up to auditory and you find your stamina is low and your vigilance is low, and well, lower than the rest. This is probably stamina because actually vigilance is still above 100. So it's probably your stamina bottlenecking. What this means is late in the test, you start, let's see if I can figure it out. Late in the test, you slowed down essentially. And you missed a couple of trials in a row of the spoken.
Interesting. Wow.
The spoken ones. You browned out late in the test and missed 2, maybe even 3 in a row.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. I must have been thinking about something else then.
But you were fatigued. You were traveling, you know? Yeah. I mean, you distracted yourself. And it's the only thing showing up. And this could be influenced by fatigue. You may have been falling asleep or something, you know?
Jet lag.
Performance on this.
Green tea.
Yes, exactly. Well, no, not the green tea, because everyone who does this test is caffeine free. So that's consistent. Everyone's like that. Everyone's dragging because of lack of caffeine.
That's true.
But this test is a little bit affected by fatigue, alertness, focus, trying, etc. The brain maps are not, unless it's many, many weeks of it. So let me stop this and share the brain map document. There it is. Okay, now the attention tests we just looked at are very valid, very straightforward. We interpret them, they make a lot of sense. The brain maps, while they don't change day to day, they're very robust, very stable. They're a little harder to interpret because this is a pure population level analysis with no meaning, no performance. And so what we're going to see here are differences from average for people your age. And that's real. Like you can see here, the oranges and yellows are, 1 to 2 standard deviations above average. There's a color bar here under the second row that's a bell curve. And so you can see your alpha here on the left is about 2.5, beta back here is about 2.5, a little excessive. But what that means is a hypothesis, not a diagnostic. So before we get into what it might mean, let me orient you a little further. On the upper right-hand corner here, it says EC, and EC means eyes closed.
Okay.
Later in the document, it changes to EO for eyes open. The first several pages are eyes closed. The very first page is what's called a Laplacian montage. A montage is a visualization of the data. The math on it is that you have to measure every spot compared to something, subtracted from something. And in Laplacian, you look at every spot compared to its neighbors, its immediately surrounding neighbors. But the second page here, linked ears montage, looks at every spot compared to the average of the earlobes. So it pulls back and looks at 10,000 foot view patterns, and also gives us some connectivity rows here at the bottom. There's nothing new on the first page for you. I'm going to start with the second page, linked ears.
Okay.
So with eyes closed, we often look at the right-hand side of the page here, betas and high betas, maybe alphas, which are fast brain waves. When you open your eyes, I want to see the left side go down, but right side, the betas and high betas, if they're excessive, like yours is back here, this red in the back of the head and beta, that's unusual, and it's probably getting in your way a little bit. So the data is real. 2, even 3 standard deviations, excess beta in the back of your head, a little bit of high beta, a little bit of alpha. That's real. Now what it means, here's my hypothesis. For many people who have a lot of back midline beta, they experience a fair amount of hypervigilance. It's hard to disengage from the environment. The brain's always scanning and trying to notice everything all the time. Is that true for you?
I would say so. Yeah.
Okay. Does it get in the way?
I mean, in what way?
Do you find yourself unable to relax in an unfamiliar environment? When you close your eyes, do you feel a little vulnerable? Is it hard to turn your mind off and fall asleep?
Yeah, I mean, the sleeping thing has always been an issue. And that's always consciously trying to
So this is probably part of it.
Yeah.
This is probably mild anxiety, hypervigilance, and a little bit of sleep issue. Probably a sleep onset issue, I would guess, not depth in this one.
Yeah, I do take extra measures to kind of power down before bedtime, because I know that that's something I struggle with.
Okay, so this is probably related to it then. Your brain doesn't want to, the off switch of your sensory processing is hard to find. Okay, you also see delta is a little high back there in the same spot, roughly. Beta, this may be an impact spot for you, like an old concussion or two. May not be, but it's plausible that you had an impact through the head in a diagonal this way. See, most of the patterns have a diagonal on the head.
Mm-hmm. No, I didn't have any. I haven't had any concussions.
Yeah, you may not have. This may just be how your brain was built.
Okay.
We can dig into more into it more though. Let's see. Continuing, here's the oh wow, look at this. So alpha is the speed of your brainwaves, how fast your mind works, actually, your processing speed. And most adult humans are just below 10 hertz. And there's a bunch of places where you're over 10.
Yeah, yeah.
That's really fast. That's why you're performing so well in the attention test. Here's the statistic, the z-score of those speeds. So you can see that in average, you're something like 3/4 to 1.5 standard deviations faster than average. That's really fast. People that have fast brains like this, here's the hypothesis, tend to be highly intelligent and a little anxious. I call this sentinel intelligence. Your brain's up and it's on, it's scanning, it's evaluating, it notices things all the time.
Yeah, I always have like thoughts running through my head.
When I see this, I often say, "Oh, I say, oh, your thoughts are having you." Sometimes.
Yeah.
Little tiger by the tail phenomena sometimes. Your delta is also fast. Delta's over 1 many places. This is slow wave sleep, dreamless sleep. So since you aren't getting enough slow wave sleep, your delta's pushing back, and this is micro sleeping, browning out throughout the day. We look at the betas, the thinking frequencies, and those are actually negative, many of them.
So what does that mean?
Means the lack of deep sleep at night means you're burning out in the afternoon and you're not able to have good cognitive stamina, probably feeling burnt out, a little foggy, fatigued, irritable in the afternoons. Basically, this is a very low-key sleep issue. This is kind of like a car driving down the highway with the emergency brake that's been left on, and you're slamming the accelerator down to make up for it. And from the outside, the car is actually running a little bit fast because of that. But from the inside, it's dragging because of that. And the minute you take your foot off the gas, things grind to a halt. It's a burnout phenomenon, basically, a fog, fatigue, burnout phenomenon. Now, we also look at injuries, and this came back so weakly positive, I would not guess this is an injury, or it's a really, really, really old injury. So the likelihood is 55% in the terms of statistics, but it's just statistics. We didn't do MRIs or anything. And I don't believe this particular discriminant when it's less than 85%.
Okay.
So I don't believe the label of injury here. That's not probably valid. I do believe the severity index, the bottom of the half of the page, for whatever reason this is showing up, it's getting in the way. So let me unpack what's here, and then I'll tell you what I think it means. The green curve, red curve are two different groups of people. Green are typical, and red are mild injuries, mostly. Closed head injuries, concussions, etc. The table here on the right are the connectivity patterns in your brain. And then I'm plotting your connectivity as the dotted line between typical and concussed populations. And you do have some altered connectivity. You're off and to the right there between the two curves. So something's going on. So concussion's plausible, but since it's such a weak positive, it's kind of like maybe when you fell out of bed when you were 5, or something happened and there was no symptoms, and 20, 30 years later you're a little bit poorly rested because of it, kind of thing. So the label of injury is probably not super valid. It also is kind of meaningless from the point of view of neurofeedback. It doesn't matter why this is here. We can work on it, and make you less foggy, better rested, etc. But it's tripping up because of your lack of deep sleep, probably. That's connectivity stuff. So if you look to these markers, it's this blue, these blue clusters of being poorly connected, that does suggest you're not well rested and foggy. So the bottom half of the page says it's 6.5 or 6 1/3 out of 10. And therefore, I would guess you're pretty familiar with symptoms of fog, fatigue, and irritability in the afternoon. Is that true? You seem very pleasant, but do you get a little bit short fuse?
Yeah, I mean, if I have a period where I'm not getting my 8 hours
enough sleep, not
getting my
you're gonna be really sensitive to disruptions in sleep because it's not really enough as it is. So your flexibility for those resources will be a little bit, under resourced, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, let's keep going. Here's your eyes open. Gorgeous brain maps, nothing excessive. It's lovely. The alpha is a little high relatively. Oh, I didn't unpack this. Absolute power is microvolts. Relative power is percentages. We use the top row as the most important row. We only use the second row as an elaborator of the top row. So you have a slightly high alpha with eyes open in the back of the head. This means some visual inattention or sleep issues. A little spaciness. Not a big deal. It's not like ADD level because it'd be solid red here if it was. A little tiny bit of fatigue in your visual system maybe. Hard to stay focused. So then you dive down to relative power. Oh, yeah, alpha is dominating a little bit, and that's why theta is low.
Oh, wow.
Theta is not absolutely low. It's relatively low because alpha is taking up all the energy back there. This is a chronic low-key sleep deprivation kind of marker that will show as visual attention difficulty. Like it's hard to stay focused on screens late in the day.
Yeah.
By fatigue in that way pretty easily is my guess.
So I'm low on delta and theta with my eyes.
Relative to alpha, because alpha is stuck on. Absolutely, your delta is fine. Theta is fine. Absolute power. The amount's fine. But your brain's kind of spending more time in alpha than it should, so alpha is dominating a little bit more. And the experience of this is being a little foggy because you're wiped out. And then jumping down.
Seeing, sorry, in the first with the eyes closed, did we see the lower theta and delta?
A little bit, yeah.
Oh, but here I had high beta.
Right, and it's only relative, you know. So, and when you close your eyes, the slow brainwaves climb. So we expect to see them actually higher with eyes closed. And the low relative makes sense here. When you open your eyes, you know, this is like deers now. So you see the same patterns, but they're a little bit different because when you open your eyes, you do suppress the slight excess slow frequencies, which is what you want to do. That's good. The green heads here are good. Now, your alpha with linked ears, I switched to linked ears pattern here for eyes open. This actually goes up with linked ears. And so this does, and you see here the coherence, connectivity is a bit stuck together in the front of the brain. This looks like you're a little spacey and sleep deprived is the most common resource for having alpha, the whole column here kind of thrown off, especially the connectivity down here. The other feature that may show up aside from some slight brain fog and spaciness when you're tired, because of the cluster in the front midline in the coherence and phase, it's plausible you could have some rumination, get stuck in your head, worry, chew on things like a dog with a bone, have songs stuck in your head, have a problem switching your attention away from things that occupy your attention. Is that true?
I would say I ruminate, yeah. That goes with the constant thoughts running through my head.
Yeah, exactly. So there it is. So this becomes a target to go after with neurofeedback. You can break that up if you want to. The theta is a little low in the back of the head. Again, this could be an injury, might not be. I'm not sure what to make of it. If it was an injury, it was actually a shear injury. See, it's actually being driven by beta. The back of the head here is this little thing, and that's what the theta, it's relatively low theta because the beta is high back there. And
that's
for some
like back, like back left then.
Yeah, ears, nose, so you're back left behind the left ear, essentially.
Yeah, I didn't have any. I had a whiplash injury from a minor car accident.
That could have been
but
that could be this.
I didn't hit my head really. It was kind of
doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Most of the damage comes from your brain hitting your skull, not from your skull hitting anything else in a concussion. Almost all of it does actually. Yeah. So whiplash causes concussion. This is probably what we're seeing. And maybe it's, you know, again, you falling out of bed at age 10 and, you know, being dazed for an hour, not noticing it, whatever. But it doesn't matter that it's an injury. I mean, it's like having some scar tissue because you're, you know, 30 or something. It doesn't really, not a big deal. But it might be something to target. It might get in the way. So if this is actually focal, meaning it's this little region and it's causing trouble, then I would expect you would have a couple of possible things showing up. The most likely would be receptive language difficulty. And the way that might show up is if you're in like a big biohacking conference and people are in a room and you're speaking to lots of different people, you may have a hard time following one person in front of you if other people near you are talking to each other. Maybe really hard to filter. Is that plausible?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like once in a while it probably happens. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, in that case, he's just having to just zero in more on whoever's speaking in front of me.
Okay, so it may not be a big deal then. It may not be a real.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that that's like a strong point for me, but.
Got it. Okay. So maybe something to think about, maybe not. Other possibilities, less likely, but possible. Dyslexia could be caused by this area. Being a little bit unusual like this. Not true for you, right? Dyslexia?
No.
Okay. What else? Gosh, it's just not likely to be much else. Maybe it'd be very unusual. You'd have to have a reverse brain, left, right, but it'd be somewhat possible you have some sensory integration issues from this, i.e. Princess and the Pea. I'm not sure if you guys in Canada have that fairy tale or not, but do you know that fairy tale, Princess and the Pea?
Is that with the mattress and the?
Yeah, she can't ignore it. She put 8 mattresses.
Yeah.
too sensitive to ignore stuff. So when people have sensory issues, they walk into supermarkets and can't ignore the fluorescent lights whining overhead. Put a new shirt on, and the texture irritates them all day long, and they can't accommodate or acclimate to it. Is any of that true for you? Any sensory sensitivity?
Maybe once in a while, like if I'm tired, or
Okay.
I think especially if I'm fatigued, then
I would normally expect it on the right-hand side. So I don't think it's an especially valid finding for you, but think about it. And if you target it with neurofeedback and you get changes there, then you would believe it. But the most obvious things like front midline beta for rumination, alpha for sleep issues. Those are the biggest features for you.
And then the beta is likely sensory overload.
Might be. It's hard to say though. I don't think it's a valid finding. I think beta is just like a little phenomenon. I wouldn't worry about it. Okay. If language isn't real, there's no dramatic sensory stuff, I wouldn't worry about it, you know. But let's take this alpha, which is not that high, and break it into 2 frequencies. So here, this is the same alpha in the top row. And then the second row, I've broken it out into a slow variant and to a fast variant. Well, guess which one's driving the excess statistics? It's the fast variant, alpha 2. Mm-hmm. When you have too much alpha 2, usually your thoughts are having you. This is why your brain's so fast. You know, it's like your brain's stuck in a flow state, essentially. Mm-hmm. You're really, really fast. It might work for you, or it might get in the way. I can't tell. But this just suggests you're, again, a couple of standard deviations faster than average in general. You're absurdly fast, Oksana. I mean, this is one of those genius brain patterns that usually comes along with genius level or gifted, 150 and above intelligence plus anxiety. Kind of what I always see here.
Interesting.
With this kind of fast brain. So you're probably in the gifted range for intelligence and probably tend to get anxious. That's the same beta. This is rumination here on the bottom. It's that same feature. Mm-hmm. That anterior cingulate switching system. Yeah. Now, looking at ADHD things, usually if you're gifted like this, you're also ADHD, but you're not. So here's the last page of the document. Okay. The ratios, theta, beta, theta, high, beta. When these are high, when they're red or orange, it's 94% accurate for spotting ADHD.
Gotcha. Okay.
You're not. You're like the opposite, actually. So
what does that mean?
A touch anxious, probably.
Okay.
It also means you have a mind like a steel trap. You don't miss anything. You can shift gears voluntarily.
And then just zero in and focus, like what we saw.
Yeah, absurdly. You're quick, you're on, and then you can reorient, be quick and on to something else, reorient, quick and on to something else. It's a little unusual. I mean, it's very unusual. Statistically, you can see it's 2 standard deviations, 2.5. And that's what we saw in the brain maps too, and in the speeds of alpha, 2, 2, 3. So this is like out there on the edge of the bell curve. This is among the most highly performant brains I've seen.
I mean, that's good news.
It's great news. And we're still seeing a little hint of bottleneck here and there from sleep issues and maybe some wear and tear and maybe a touch of rumination. So this is a great combination of things to find. A lot of extremely high performance markers mixed with a couple of very particular bottlenecks. Nothing broad, really, really discrete things, which means you can target them quickly, effectively, and permanently make them change. So if you don't like ruminating, at some point you can train it down, a little FZ, the little front midline hotspot, and something like 20, 30 sessions of training on executive function, sleep, and stress should probably get your rumination under your control, meaning it only happens when you want it to, and it should also help get your sleep maintenance much, much deeper, your sleep onset much easier. Those things would all happen, I would guess, in a permanent way in something like 3 to 4 months of training for complete permanent change. And you would have effects subjectively something like 3 or 4 sessions in, is my guess. You'd feel, 2 weeks in, it would be feeling it. And your sleep would be shifting. And then we would, watch what happens and make changes. So.
The rumination bit, it's useful when if I'm processing new ideas or things that I've learned, but then sometimes it's a little
but not when it's stuck on,
exactly.
Turn
your brain off. I'm like, all right, enough.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This probably gets in the way when you've had a really stressful day and you're lying in bed at night and you can't turn off that mode. It's like, come on, brain. We don't need to be thinking about this right now.
Yeah, I would say I struggled with that in the past for sure. And over the past year, I've really kind of zeroed in on biohacking my sleep and optimizing where I can. And I've noticed a significant difference, but it's still easy to slip back into those phases. I mean, when I did this test, that whole week was just so busy at work that I wasn't getting my optimal sleep. And so I was really feeling it by the time I was taking this test. I think it was Saturday morning.
Well, the brain map should be relatively insensitive to that. They should pick up a 10,000-foot view, and a brain map today, a year, 2 years from now, should actually be the same, even if you have changes in sleep status. The attention test would actually vary a little bit. So your attention performance, even though it's 2 standard deviations above average, might actually be higher.
Yeah, I should retake that test.
And on that note, I think we comped you the first map, right? But we don't charge for remapping.
Yeah.
At your discretion, you should feel free to pop down to St. Louis if you want to go to a convenient office. We have one there, and get a brain map done and an attention test every few months. If you want to do biohacking things, see what works, and have us help you index the data and see what works, that periodically, we're happy to. There's no charge for that. But to a man with a hammer, every problem is a nail, right? And to me, the hammer is neurofeedback. So I'm sort of thinking about ways to go after your brain and train up these slow frequencies, train down to the fast frequencies, and get you sleeping like a rock.
That would be great.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's going to take probably, at least 40 sessions. I would guess maybe even up to 50 to make a permanent change for you. You're in Toronto, is that right?
I am, yeah.
You are. So not near one of our offices yet anyways. I know we want to open up in Toronto, but it hasn't happened yet. So a couple things we could do. I mean, of course, the brain map data is valid. You can refer to it in the future and or get more maps and decide how to tackle this later. But there are a couple of good neurofeedback people in Toronto. There's some greats in the field, been around for like 50 years. The Thompsons, Linda and Michael Thompson, they're psychologists in Toronto, and they have a neurofeedback center. And they're pretty legit. Like I'd be comfortable going to them if I was, you. Yeah. But they're going to be somewhat expensive, and they're psychologists, and you may not like them. I don't know. It's a different process than working with a trainer. Working with a therapist. The other option is, I would love to just host you whenever you're passing through town and do a couple sessions and help you understand your brain. But if you want to actually train, we can send you equipment. You can buy a system of gear that does not expire. You can train forever with it and keep coming back and getting some support for mapping. And we do a 3-month period of like coaching and supervision where we train you how to use the gear, do weekly calls. We have a live Slack channel for tech support when getting set up. We send morning surveys for your sleep, evening surveys for your day. We kind of index all of that and gradually dial in different protocols for you. And that takes a couple months. And then by that time, you're pretty comfortable and you can keep training long term. And I won't charge you for a map every few months and then a consult on the maps with some candidate protocols. We'll only charge you if you actually want like weekly calls, shared charge, check-ins, live chats, that kind of stuff. That's the supervision program. But there's no charge, once you've done that 3-month program, the gear still works, your brain still works, you know how to train, the maps are free. And so a lot of my biohackers continue long term without any really aggressive support. We just hang out and talk every so often with their brain. And you can continue to really get great results. You can also use the same gear for friends and family. Just need a brain map, and we can, kick off a supervision program for you if you desire or not. It's your gear. After a few months, you'll know the basics. You'll know that, oh, hey, I want to try this SMR protocol on my buddy and see what he notices. And I'll give you some advice around how not to screw people up or how to
that would be great.
if you want to try some things, but it'll take some time to make a change. And but these things are all things that change almost every time. These kind of
you said 20 to 40 sessions.
It will take at least 40 for permanence. You'll probably feel it in about 5.
Oh wow! Okay.
Sessions. So it's like maybe within 2 weeks you'll be feeling it because you train about 3 times a week.
So would that result in less rumination and?
Oh, huge. Yeah. And you can decide. I have protocols that would work for you for rumination, for deep sleep, for alertness, and you would try them. And as the effects show up, we dial in the frequencies and get the best version of the protocol for you. And then, you can decide this week I'm working on alertness. This week I'm working on rumination, and you will feel it drop as you work on it. And we can kind of go back and forth, kind of like working out at the gym. Oh, today I'm going to do core. Or 3 times a week, I'm doing core workouts, and beginning of the week, it's a chest day, and end of the week, it's a legs day. I don't know, making stuff up. But, you can kind of be systematic about that. I would normally just kind of suggest you go after it in foundation ways, like let's really work on the deep sleep for a minute, for a couple of weeks. Once that starts shifting, let's go to rumination markers. I think some of them are related. You may be ruminating a touch as a compensatory strategy for being a bit worn out.
Mm-hmm.
You may like crank up the switching system because you feel a little soft in the focus, and this helps you not feel that way.
Oh, okay.
It's a little stressful perhaps when it, overdoes, but it might be a bit of a compensation. So I have a hunch that if you're better rested, you will also ruminate significantly less.
Less. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. And then you
So
mentioned that these brainwaves, typically the brain map does not change over a lot of time.
Unless you do something to your brain like neurofeedback, injuries, medications. If you do neurofeedback, I typically get about one standard deviation of change every like 25 sessions, roughly.
Okay.
So that's why I'm saying around 40, maybe 50 for you total, which should get rid of most of this permanently.
Mm-hmm. So
at least from
in your hypothesis, the deep sleep issue, is the lack of deep sleep caused by the brain waves that you're seeing in terms of their activity, or is it
the result?
Chicken and the egg type of situation?
Exactly. It's one of those two. It's either chicken or egg here. I'm not sure which.
So yeah, so it could be like the low deep sleep that's causing these brainwaves to appear, or the other way, they may just be ever present, and so that's causing me to not get enough deep sleep.
Exactly. Or maybe you had a mild injury when you were young, and that eroded the sleep architecture gradually, which means you weren't getting enough deep sleep, which meant you felt foggy, which made you ramp up anxiety to compensate, which threw off your deep sleep further.
Yeah.
Eventually it's sort of a system. We can't tell where it started.
Right.
I have no idea why you're foggy and a little fatigued and ruminating, but I'm pretty sure you are. And if you tell me that's true, then I get excited, because now I can go, okay, great, let's target the things that are probably that.
Right.
And, targeting the rumination will feel like your brain is unclenching.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let that go. It's a nice experience if you enjoy,
that's why I meditate. It's a nice time out for all the thoughts.
Yeah. So, and we can do meditation protocols. I can do eyes closed, alpha, theta protocols for you, deepen your meditation quickly, give you access to the flow state, that hypnagogic state between awake and asleep, where it's sort of non-linear, non-verbal, but ideas, emotions, insight, all sorts bubbling up. That's really easy access to with neurofeedback. Basically, it's a float tank with neurofeedback kind of experience called alpha theta. And it's the equivalent of a float, a sort of disconnected, non-linear mind. But you get there without getting wet. It takes about 8 minutes to start to drop into the state. And you're held there for about 20 minutes in the half-hour session. So it's really quite.
Theoretically, the flow tanks could have that same effect as well.
Oh, they do have a little bit of that hypnagogic high theta state. Yeah, the on the edge of sleep state where the theta surges and alpha drops away. Yeah, it's a crossover state. But it's easy to both see and to sort of see it to make it happen in neurofeedback. So we typically it's used for creativity. It brings up the immune system. It's used for calming down the old burnt out alcoholics who can't settle down without a drink anymore. But it sort of teaches your brain to deeply relax. Yeah. And it has a very strong effect on T cells. It makes them surge hugely as a relaxation response. You get a massive T cell burst of CD4 plus cells, actually. So those are all, really reasonable things. And one more thing occurs to me. It's not very common. Some people that have beta on the back like this also have a touch of vertigo. Any vertigo?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, actually, I started getting a bit of vertigo maybe about 5 years ago. And I do notice that if I've had a few nights of poor sleep, but honestly, I haven't suffered from it in a few years now, maybe a couple of years. But I do notice now if I have consecutive few nights of very poor sleep, I'll be feeling quite off balance. And when I did initially start getting vertigo, it was pretty bad. It was like that drunk feeling or like losing breath.
I have a hunch you're actually dealing with vertiginous migraines, and the beta is a sign of the blood flow changing back there. I think you had a really, really, really old injury, and the beta is not, a really old change in your brain. Let's not see your injury, and the beta is actually now a blood flow change, and you're experiencing temporal lobe migraines that are not producing typical migraine symptoms, but are producing vertigo as the side effect.
Wow.
That's my guess. It doesn't matter if that's accurate or not. The fact you're getting some vertigo could be simply not getting enough deep sleep, but I think it's this posterior beta, pulling your balance off. Your brain's like, what's going on? I mean, the theta too, it's all the same. The back areas I used to get severe vertigo. I had it solidly for like 4 months straight when I first got it, and it was brutal.
It's awful. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's horrible. But I have a protocol that shuts it down reliably for most people. So, you know, that becomes a candidate protocol for you. Like once you do neurofeedback, here's something to try. This might work for that. Here's something to try. Work for that. And then you can bring those in. If acute effects show up, you can drop them on the vertigo and see what happens to it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you want to train broadly and see if your sleep is, you know, and I'm sure it would be. And then once that starts shifting, and once you're sleeping significantly different, we want to remap you because these maps look different after you get a really big shift. So 20, 30 sessions in, I'd invite you down to St. Louis to pop down for the day or something, and get assessments done. But yeah, this is all pretty classic stuff, except for this back left behind the ear. It's a little hard to interpret. Oh, and on this the page I've opened here, the high beta in front of the left ear, that's probably muscle tension or jaw tension because it's in the fast frequency and that tends to show up next to the ears. So I would ignore that. The high beta is probably just noise in the data. It's EMG, muscle tension, not EEG.
Yeah, I was noticing, well, when I was doing the test, the jaw clenching kept coming up. So it was a noise resulted.
Just this. This is it. Yeah, we clipped out all the noisy bits except for this. You know, we couldn't clip enough of it out to keep it out of the data that we use for analysis. So here it is. There's always some noise in EEG. It's, you know, it's almost never perfect. For you, it's actually pretty darn clean. And the noise doesn't show up eyes closed. Here's eyes closed. There's eyes closed. That's another sign that it's eyes. Because when you open your eyes, you kind of lift your forehead. Oh, there it is, showing up on the left. And then when you open, you know, the focal patterns, up there it is. Yeah, so this is probably chronic jaw tension in the left that you can't completely control. And it's the strap muscles, the temporal muscles that go from the left side of your jaw up to like the left side of your head with big anchor muscles. That's what's slightly tight here. And that could be chronic, you know, TMJ stuff. It could be just some tension. It could be you weren't well rested, so you were kind of clenching a little bit and it popped up the left more than the right. Not a big deal, but it's not probably real. So I wouldn't think of it as real brainwaves. While the beta behind the ear is much more likely to be a real thing.
So for some people that would show up as a migraine, and for me, you're hypothesizing it shows up as vertigo?
Migraines don't show up. I guessed migraine because you said vertigo. I guessed vertigo because of lateralized beta like this.
Okay, gotcha.
So yes, is a short answer to the question you asked, but not exactly. It's like I had to get there through a bunch of inferences. If you were actively having a migraine, it might show up. Probably would not. But it does suggest if you do training, neurofeedback training, not only do you want to do EEG training, you probably want to do what's called HEG training, infrared blood flow training. And that will work on the vasculature. It'll make the vasculature much more robust and strong, so the blood flow will not drop under conditions of stress, dehydration, anxiety, too little caffeine, etc. And I think you do have a little circulatory issues in the back here where the theta is blue and the beta is red. I think
would low blood pressure play a role in that at all?
I'm sorry?
Would low blood pressure play a role?
Probably not, because it wouldn't be focal on one side like this, is my guess. You know, you're very tall, and that always tends to have low blood pressure issues anyways.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's possible that you got a little low blood volume compared to your height, and your blood, you know, the osmolarity is a little off, and the circulatory system on the left just happens to show it. But that's a lot of ifs, you know?
Yeah.
I honestly think that the most plausible reason for that little cluster behind the left ear is a very old injury that wasn't a big deal. It left your brain a little bit off historically. Or even more plausible, this is the brain you happen to show up in the world with. You know, this is how you were built. That's also very plausible.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. But if the spot behind the ear seems to be a culprit, if it's likely to be a culprit, then we start talking about, you know, what to do about it essentially. So
yeah.
Okay, so that is the end of my whirlwind tour through your brain.